Thanks for joining me on this heartfelt journey. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more stories that touch the soul. The letter arrived 3 days after they buried my father. I stood in my Chicago apartment's kitchen, the morning light filtering through the blinds, coffee going cold in my hands as I read it again. The family lawyer's words were a gut punch. Substantial changes to the will, immediate presence required, urgent family matter. Dad had always promised the restaurant would be mine. We'd built it together, late nights poring over menus, his steady hands guiding mine through the chaos of opening day. So why had he left everything, the estate, the business, all of it, to Eleanor, my stepmother of barely 2 years? I packed a bag and drove the 14-hour stretch from Chicago to coastal Maine, a blur of asphalt and memory. The Mitchell family estate loomed in my mind, a Victorian mansion carved into the cliffs, its spires sharp against the sky. I was 38, but the winding coastal road felt like a time machine, pulling me back to childhood summers, Dad's laughter, Mom's lavender scent, James teaching me to skip stones. But now the late October wind whipped fallen leaves across my windshield as the iron gates came into view. 20 years of memories lived in those walls. Something felt wrong, heavy, like the air before a storm. Eleanor's Mercedes gleamed in the circular driveway, parked beside James's Range Rover. My older brother had always been the steady one, the one who fixed things. Leaky pipes, family fights, my broken heart when Mom died. But his recent texts were strange, cryptic. Be careful what you believe. His last one read, "What did he know that I didn't?" The front door opened before I could knock. Eleanor stood there, her black dress tailored to perfection, not a hair out of place despite the wind. "Sarah, darling, we've been waiting." Her smile was sharp, never reaching her eyes. I'd never warmed to her, her presence a cold shadow of her dad's final years. "Where's James?" I asked, stepping into the foyer. The house smelled different. Eleanor had replaced Mom's lavender with something heavy, musky, expensive. It clung to the air, suffocating. "In the study. There's someone else here too, the detective." I froze mid-step. "Detective?" Eleanor's manicured hand waved dismissively. "A formality, dear, given the circumstances of your father's passing." "The circumstances?" That's what they called it. A healthy 65-year-old man doesn't just collapse in his study, heart stopped, no explanation. I'd been asking questions since that night, calling the coroner, the lawyer, anyone who'd listen. No one had answers. James stood as I entered the study, his face drawn, worry lines creasing his forehead. He looked older than 42, his broad shoulders slumped. Behind Dad's mahogany desk sat a woman in a sharp blazer, her badge glinting in the afternoon light. "Ms. Mitchell," she nodded, "I'm Detective Morris. I have questions about your father's business dealings before his death." Before I could respond, a knock echoed through the house. Eleanor excused herself, her heels clicking on the hardwood. Moments later, a voice made my heart skip. Becca Chen, my high school best friend, the one I'd never quite gotten over. "I heard about Tom," she said, stepping into the study, her dark eyes meeting mine. I was 17 again, stealing glances across the chemistry lab, my pulse racing when she smiled. She'd left for college on the West Coast, and I'd buried those feelings, locked them away with my teenage dreams. Now, at 37, she was the town's top real estate agent, her presence both familiar and jarring. "I'm so sorry, Sarah," she said, her voice soft. Her hand brushed mine, a fleeting warmth that stirred something long dormant. The next hours were a blur. Morris revealed Dad had been selling properties quietly, moving large sums of money. James knew something but stayed silent, his jaw tight. Eleanor deflected, her composure cracking when certain dates were mentioned. "There's more," Morris said, pulling out a folder. She spread photos on the desk. Eleanor meeting someone in shadowy alleys, parking lots, a diner. The last photo, dated the day before Dad died, made my blood run cold. That's impossible, Eleanor whispered, her hand trembling as she reached for it. Becca leaned closer, her shoulder against mine. Sarah, she murmured, there's something in the boathouse. You need to see it. James shot up. No, Becca, we agreed. She deserves to know, Becca snapped. About the company? What Tom found? Enough! Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. This meeting is over. Detective, my lawyer will contact you. I barely heard her. My eyes were locked on another photo's date stamp. July 15th, when Dad changed his will. In the background, barely visible, was a face I knew. Someone I trusted. Someone playing us all. Sarah, Becca whispered, her hand on my arm. Boathouse. Midnight. I nodded, my mind racing. Whatever Dad had found, it had cost him his life. As I watched Eleanor gather the photos, James's guilty expression, Becca's warmth stirring old feelings, I stood on the edge of a truth that could shatter everything. The grandfather clock struck 5, its chimes echoing. 7 hours until midnight. 7 hours to decide who I could trust. Someone in this room was lying, and they'd kill to keep their secrets. I realized the truth was closer than I thought. Standing in the study with Becca's hand on my arm, her whispered invitation to the boathouse echoing in my mind. The grandfather clock's chimes had faded, but the photograph, Eleanor meeting a stranger the day before Dad died, pressed against my chest like a stone. James's guilty glance, Eleanor's trembling hand, Becca's cryptic urgency. They pulled me toward a truth I wasn't ready to face. But I had to know. For Dad. For myself. The Maine night was a beast, clawing at me as I slipped out of the mansion at 11:45 p.m. Rain stung my face, soaking through my wool coat, the cold seeping into my bones like a warning. My flashlight's beams sliced through the drizzle, catching the muddy path to the boathouse. The ocean roared below, waves crashing against jagged rocks, their rhythm a pulse of secrets buried deep. The boathouse loomed at the property's edge, its weathered planks slick with rain, a dark sentinel against the churning sea. As a child, I'd played here with James, building forts from driftwood, our laughter louder than the gulls. Now, it felt like a tomb, its shadows hiding truths that could break me. I pushed the door open, the hinges groaning in protest. Becca was inside, her silhouette flickering against a lantern's glow, hung from a rusted hook. Her dark hair clung to her neck, damp from the storm, and her eyes held the intensity I'd fallen for at 16. Back then, we'd shared secrets under the stars, her hand brushing mine as we lay on the cliffs, dreaming of lives we were too young to chase. I'd loved her, fiercely, but never said it. She'd left for college and I'd buried those feelings, locked them away with my teenage heart. Now, her gaze softened as it met mine, a spark of the past flickering in the dim light. Sarah, she said, her voice low but steady over the wind's howl. You're here. What did you find? I asked, stepping inside. The air was thick with salt and mildew, the floorboards creaking under my boots. My flashlight swept the room, catching cobwebs in the corners, a rusted anchor against the wall, and a glint of something metallic under a tarp in the far corner. My heart thudded, each beat a drum roll of dread. Becca handed me a folder, its edges frayed, stamped with the logo of Dad's old accounting firm. Your father was hiding assets, she said, her voice cutting through the storm's roar. Millions tied to offshore accounts. He was moving money for years, and Eleanor knew. My hands trembled as I opened the folder. Pages of ledgers scrawled in Dad's precise handwriting, listed transfers, dates, and a name that stopped my breath. Catherine Ellis, my mother. The woman who'd raised me, who'd died when I was 12, her laughter still echoing in my dreams. I saw her now. In a memory so vivid it hurt, kneeling in the garden, her hands dusted with soil, teaching me to plant roses. They're tough, Sarah, she'd said, her smile warm. Like you. Why was her name tied to accounts opened decades after her death? This doesn't make sense, I whispered, my voice barely audible. There's more, Becca said, pulling out a single sheet, a birth certificate, my birth certificate. But the mother listed wasn't Catherine Ellis, it was Eleanor Mitchell, my stepmother, the woman who'd inherited everything. The room spun, the lantern's light blurring as my knees buckled. This can't be right, I said, my voice cracking. Eleanor's not my mother. Becca knelt beside me, her hand on my arm, warm and steady. She was Catherine's sister, she said softly. Your biological mother. She gave you up after you were born, and Catherine adopted you. Your dad didn't know until last year, when he started digging into the accounts. Eleanor married him to get closer to the estate, and to you. The boathouse seemed to shrink, its walls closing in. Eleanor, my mother, the woman who'd smiled so coldly in the foyer, who'd deflected every question about Dad's death, was my flesh and blood? I thought of Catherine, her lavender perfume, her gentle hands braiding my hair before bed, her stories of far-off places. She was my mother, not this stranger who'd wormed her way into our family. And Dad, had he died because he'd uncovered her secret? I sank onto a crate, the folder slipping from my hands. Another memory hit me, Catherine in the kitchen, flour on her cheeks, laughing as she taught me to make bread. Family's what we choose, Sarah, she'd said. Had she known about Eleanor? Why had she kept it from me? Becca's hand squeezed mine, pulling me back. There's something else, she said, pulling another document, a property deed for a house in Bar Harbor dated 6 months before Dad's death. Eleanor's signature was there, elegant and unmistakable, co-signed beside Dad's. He bought this in secret, Becca said. Eleanor was helping him move money, but she was also siphoning it. Millions, Sarah. My mind raced. Dad, hiding money? With Eleanor? I thought of the photograph in the study, Eleanor meeting a man the day before Dad died. Was he part of this? A hired hand? My stomach churned, the pieces jagged and incomplete. Why didn't Dad tell me? I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. He was protecting you, Becca said, her voice gentle. He left a letter. I found it in the property records. She handed me a single page, Dad's handwriting unmistakable. Sarah, it read, if you're reading this, I'm gone. Eleanor's not who she seems. The accounts, the will, it's all connected to you. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner. I love you. My heart broke, tears mixing with the rain on my face. Dad had known. He died trying to shield me from a truth I was only now grasping. I clutched the letter, my fingers trembling, the paper soft and worn. Another memory surfaced. Dad on the cliffs, teaching me to fish, his hand steady as he baited the hook. You're stronger than you know, Sarah, he'd said. I hadn't believed him then. I wasn't sure I believed him now. We need to call Detective Morris, I said, my voice shaking but resolute. This is enough to... A creak cut me off, sharp and jarring. James stood in the doorway, rain dripping from his coat, his face pale under the lantern's glow. Sarah, you shouldn't be here, he said, his voice tight, almost pleading. This isn't safe. Safe? I snapped, standing, the folder clutched to my chest. Dad's dead, James. Someone in this family is lying, and I'm done with secrets. What did you know? He hesitated, his eyes flicking to Becca, who stood firm, her arms crossed.
I tried to protect you,
he said finally, his voice heavy with guilt.
Dad found out Eleanor was siphoning money from the accounts. He confronted her, and I think she panicked.
My heart stopped. You think she killed him? The words were shards of glass cutting as they left my throat. James had been my rock through Mom's death, Dad's late nights, my own doubts when I opened the restaurant. Had he known all along? Had he let Dad die? He didn't answer, his silence louder than the storm. I stepped toward him, anger and grief warring inside me. "Why didn't you say anything?" I demanded, my voice breaking. "You let her—" "I didn't know for sure," he said, his hands raised, pleading. "I saw her with his coffee, slipping something in. I thought it was medicine. When he died, I started digging, but I didn't want to believe it. I didn't want to lose you too." Lose me. The words hit like a wave, stirring memories of James carrying me on his shoulders, teaching me to ride a bike, holding me when Mom's casket was lowered. He'd always been there, but now his silence felt like betrayal. I opened my mouth to speak, but a shadow flickered outside the boathouse window, cutting through the rain. Eleanor stood there, her black coat blending into the night, rain streaking her face. A small pistol glinted in her hand, its barrel catching the lantern's light. "You should have left it alone, Sarah," she said, her voice calm, almost mournful, but with an edge that chilled me to the core. I didn't want it to come to this. Becca stepped in front of me, her body tense, shielding me. "Eleanor, put the gun down," she said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We can talk—" "There's nothing to talk about," Eleanor interrupted, her voice cracking like ice. "Tom was going to ruin everything. He found the accounts, the truth about you, Sarah. I had to protect my legacy." "You poisoned him," I whispered, the pieces falling into place. The autopsy had noted an unusual toxin, rare, untraceable, dismissed as inconclusive. But Eleanor had access to Dad's coffee, his evening whiskey, the meals she'd insisted on preparing. She'd been there every day, watching, waiting, a shadow in our home. "I didn't want to," she said, her hand trembling, the gun wavering. "But he was going to tell you. He was going to take you away from me again." Again? The word hit like a punch. She'd given me up once, abandoned me, and now she'd killed to keep me? My stomach churned, rage and grief colliding. I thought of Dad, his warm smile, his steady hands, the way he'd read to me at night. He'd deserved better than this, better than her. James moved, suddenly lunging for the gun. "Eleanor, stop!" he shouted. A shot rang out, sharp and deafening, echoing off the boathouse walls. James staggered, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers, staining his coat crimson. He crumpled to the floor, a groan escaping his lips. Becca screamed, her voice raw, and I froze, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out the storm. The world slowed, the lantern's light casting jagged shadows, and I realized we were trapped with a killer, a secret, and a truth that could destroy us all. The gunshot echoed in my ears, a deafening crack that drowned out the storm. James lay crumpled on the boathouse floor, blood seeping through his fingers, staining his coat crimson. His groan was faint, swallowed by the ocean's roar outside. Becca's scream pierced the air, raw and desperate, as Eleanor stood frozen, her pistol trembling in her hand, rain streaking her face like tears. The lantern's light cast jagged shadows, turning the boathouse into a stage for betrayal. My heart pounded, a frantic drum against my ribs. I couldn't lose James. Not him. Not after Dad. "Sarah, run!" Becca yelled, her voice shaking but fierce. But I couldn't move, couldn't leave her or James. Not again, not after years of regret, of words unspoken. My eyes locked on the rusted oar leaning against the wall, its weight a promise of action. I grabbed it, my hand slick with rain, and swung as Eleanor turned toward me, her gun glinting in the dim light. The wood connected with her wrist, a sickening crack splitting the air. The pistol clattered across the damp floorboards, skidding into the shadows. Becca lunged, tackling Eleanor to the ground, her strength surprising, pinning the older woman's arms as she struggled. I scrambled for the gun, my fingers trembling as they closed around its cold metal. I stood, pointing it at Eleanor, my mother, my father's killer. My hands shook, the weight of the weapon heavier than I'd imagined. "Stay down," I said, my voice barely steady, cracking under the strain. "It's over." Eleanor's eyes, met mine, a mix of defiance and despair. "You don't understand, Sarah," she whispered, her voice soft but venomous. "I did it for you. For us." "For us?" I spat, my anger boiling over. "You killed him! You took Dad from me!" The words burned, each one a shard of grief. I thought of Dad, his warm smile, his hands guiding mine as we kneaded dough in the restaurant kitchen, his voice promising I'd always have a home. He deserved better than her poison, her lies. Headlights cut through the rain, red and blue flashing against the boathouse walls. The door burst open and Detective Morris stormed in, her service weapon drawn, 2 officers behind her. "Drop it, Sarah," she said, her voice calm but firm, her eyes scanning the scene, James bleeding, Becca pinning Eleanor, me with the gun. I lowered it slowly, my hands shaking, and handed it to an officer, stepping back as they cuffed Eleanor. Her face was a mask of defeat, but her gaze lingered on me, heavy with something I couldn't name. Regret, maybe? Or a twisted kind of love. I knelt beside James, pressing my scarf against his shoulder, the blood warm and sticky under my fingers. "You're going to be okay," I told him, my voice breaking. His breathing was shallow, his face pale, but he nodded, his hand gripping mine. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "I should have told you. I saw her with the coffee, the powder. I thought it was medicine." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, tears blurring my vision. James had been my anchor through Mom's death, Dad's late nights, my own doubts when I opened the restaurant. His silence felt like a second betrayal, cutting deeper than Eleanor's lies. "I didn't want to believe it," he said, wincing as a paramedic arrived, pushing me aside to work on his wound. "I thought I could fix it, keep us together." Becca knelt beside me, her hand on my shoulder, her presence a quiet strength. "I called Morris before we came," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I had a feeling this wasn't just about money." Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, I was 16 again, sitting on the cliffs with her, our hands brushing as we watched the stars. I'd loved her then, too afraid to say it, and now she was here, risking everything for me. My heart ached with gratitude, with something deeper I wasn't ready to name. The police swept to the boathouse, their flashlights cutting through the shadows. An officer pried up a loose floorboard, revealing a locked chest, its hinges rusted but intact. Morris broke it open, revealing a vial of colorless liquid, an alkaloid toxin, rare and untraceable, the same found in Dad's autopsy. Beside it was a letter, Eleanor's elegant handwriting, detailing her plan to a private investigator. "Secure the estate. Find leverage on Tom. He's asking too many questions." My stomach churned. She'd hired someone to dig into Dad's past, but he'd been one step ahead, hiding evidence here where she'd never look. As the officers led Eleanor away, she turned to me, her voice barely a whisper over the storm. "I loved you, Sarah. I gave you up to protect you. When I came back, I couldn't let you go again." Her words hung in the air, heavy with a love I didn't want, couldn't understand. I didn't respond. There were no words for the betrayal, the grief, the truth that my mother was a murderer. The rain fell harder, washing away her presence as the police cruiser vanished into the night. The paramedics loaded James into an ambulance, his eyes fluttering but holding mine. "Don't give up on us," he whispered, before they closed the doors. I stood in the rain, Becca beside me, her hand slipping into mine. The boathouse loomed behind us, its secrets spilled, but its shadows still heavy. I thought of Dad, his letter in the folder, his warning about Eleanor. He'd known she was my mother, had died to protect me from her. But what else had he known? What else had he hidden? Back at the mansion, I sat in Dad's study, the folder open on the desk. The lantern's light was gone, replaced by the cold glow of a desk lamp. Becca sat across from me, her dark hair still damp, her eyes searching mine. "You okay?" she asked, her voice soft, like it used to be when we'd stay up late, whispering secrets in my bedroom. I remembered one night, 17, the summer before she left for college. We'd snuck onto the roof, the ocean a dark expanse below, and she'd told me about her dreams, travel, a life beyond this small town. I'd wanted to tell her I loved her, that I'd follow her anywhere, but fear had locked the words away. Now, her presence was a lifeline, pulling me from the wreckage of this night. "No," I admitted, my voice raw. "But I'm glad you're here." Her hand reached across the desk, her fingers brushing mine, a spark of warmth in the cold. I wanted to say more, to tell her how her courage tonight, her steady gaze, had kept me grounded. Instead, I squeezed her hand, letting the silence speak. I flipped through the folder, my eyes catching on a second letter from Dad, tucked beneath the ledgers. My heart stopped. It was dated the day he died, his handwriting shakier than the first. "Sarah," it read, "there's more to this than Eleanor. The accounts, the house in Bar Harbor, it's not just about money. It's about family. I found something else, something I couldn't tell you. Not yet. Look in the attic, behind the old mirror. I love you." My breath caught, tears stinging my eyes. Another secret? After everything, Eleanor's betrayal, James's wound, the truth about my birth, what else could Dad have hidden? Becca read the letter over my shoulder, her breath warm against my neck. "The attic," she said, her voice steady but curious. "We need to look." I nodded, my mind racing. The boathouse had given up its secrets, but the mansion still held more. Eleanor was gone, but Dad's words lingered, a warning and a promise. What had he found? And why had he kept it from me until his final moments? The storm outside had quieted, but inside me a new tempest was brewing, pulling me toward a truth I wasn't sure I could face. The boathouse's shadows lingered in my mind, even as the storm's roar faded. James was alive, his wound serious but not fatal, the ambulance's red lights disappearing into the Maine night. Eleanor was gone, her cuffs glinting as the police cruiser carried her away. Her whispered confession, "I loved you, Sarah," cutting deeper than the rain. I stood in the mansion's study, the folder of Dad's secrets open on the mahogany desk, his shaky handwriting a ghost in the lamplight. Becca's hand rested on mine, her warmth a lifeline, but Dad's final letter burned in my thoughts. Look in the attic, behind the old mirror. Another secret. After everything, Eleanor's betrayal, James's blood, the truth of my birth, what else could he have hidden? My heart was heavy, a tangle of grief and hope as I faced a future I didn't understand. The weeks that followed were a haze of hospital visits and police interviews. James lay in a sterile room, his arm in a sling, his face pale but his eyes bright with the stubborn strength I'd always known. I sat by his bed, the beep of monitors a steady rhythm against the silence. "I should have told you," he said, his voice hoarse, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. "I saw her with the coffee months ago, a powder, dissolving fast. She said it was for his heart. When he died, I started digging, but I couldn't face it. I didn't want to lose you, Sarah." His words stung, a fresh wound atop old scars. James had been my rock. Through Mom's death, Dad's late nights, the chaos of opening my restaurant, I remembered a summer day, me at 10, him at 14, building a kite on the cliffs, his laughter louder than the waves. "You're stuck with me, kid," he'd said, tying the string. Now his silence had nearly cost us everything. "You should have trusted me," I said, my voice soft but sharp. "But you're still my brother." He looked at me, tears in his eyes, and nodded. "Always," he whispered. I squeezed his hand, forgiving him not because it was easy, but because he was family, flaws and all. The hospital room felt smaller, the weight of our shared history settling around us like dust. Becca became my shadow, her presence a quiet strength. We spent nights in the mansion's library, sorting through Dad's papers, piecing together the life he'd fought to protect. The lavender scent returned, a tribute to Catherine, who'd filled this house with love. I found an old photo album, its pages brittle, showing Mom and me in the garden, her hands guiding mine as we planted roses. I was 6, my braid messy, her smile brighter than the sun. "They're tough, Sarah," she'd said, brushing dirt from my cheek. "Like you." The memory was a knife, sweet and sharp, cutting through the years. Why had she never mentioned Eleanor, her sister? Why had she carried that secret alone? One evening, under the library's chandelier, Becca sat beside me, her shoulder brushing mine. "You're not alone in this," she said, her voice soft, her dark eyes searching. I remembered another night, 17, the summer before she left for college. We'd snuck onto the roof, the ocean a dark mirror below, stars scattered above. She'd talked about her dreams, travel, a life beyond this town, and I'd wanted to tell her I loved her, that her laughter was my anchor. But fear had silenced me, and she'd gone. Now, her hand found mine, her fingers intertwining, and the spark I'd buried flared to life. "I never stopped thinking about you, Sarah," she said, her voice barely a whisper. My heart stuttered. "I never stopped either," I admitted, my voice raw. I leaned into her, our foreheads touching, the world shrinking to the warmth of her breath. We didn't need words, not yet. Her presence was enough, a promise we'd face this together. The library shadows softened, the chandelier's light casting a glow like hope, and I felt something mend inside me, a piece of my heart stitching back together. Detective Morris called me to the station a month later, her office stark under fluorescent lights. "There's something you need to see," she said, sliding a file across her desk. It was a DNA test, ordered by Dad before his death. My breath caught as I read the results. Eleanor was my mother, as the birth certificate had shown, but James wasn't my brother. He was my cousin, the son of Catherine's brother, Michael, raised by Dad and Catherine after Michael and his wife died in a car accident when James was 2. Dad had known, had loved us both unconditionally, but never told us to spare us the pain. I drove to the hospital, the file trembling in my hands, the coastal road blurred by tears. James was sitting up, his sling gone, his strength returning. I told him, my voice shaking. He laughed, a tired, bittersweet sound. "Doesn't change a thing, Sarah," he said, his eyes bright. "You're still my sister." We sat in silence, the weight of our history heavier now, but stronger. Family wasn't blood. It was the kite we'd built, the nights we'd mourned Mom, the promise to keep going. I thought of Catherine, her love choosing us both, and Dad, his quiet strength holding us together. Their legacy wasn't the mansion or the money, it was us. The revelation shifted something in me. I'd defined family by the mansion's walls, by Dad's laughter, by Mom's gentle hands. Now those walls felt both too big and too small, holding secrets I'd never. One afternoon, as I walked through the garden, the roses' scent wrapped around me like Mom's embrace. I saw her in my mind, kneeling in the dirt, her hands guiding mine. "Family's what we choose," she'd said, her voice clear as the sky. I'd chosen her, Dad, James, and now Becca. But Eleanor's shadow lingered, her twisted love a scar I couldn't erase. Her trial was set for spring, the evidence overwhelming. Bank records, the toxin, her confession. She'd siphoned millions using Catherine's name, her sister's identity, to reclaim a life she'd abandoned. Her marriage to Dad was a calculated step, not just for money, but for me, her daughter, lost to her choices. I didn't know how to reconcile her love with her betrayal, and part of me didn't want to try. 6 months later, spring broke over the Maine coast, the ocean glittering under a rare clear sky. I was clearing the attic, sorting through Dad's old books, their pages yellowed with time, when I found the safe he'd mentioned in his letter. It was hidden behind the old mirror in the east wing, its frame cracked but heavy with memory. The combination was scratched into the back of Dad's watch, a gift from Catherine, its ticking a faint echo of their love. My hands shook as I turned the dial, the click of the lock loud in the dusty silence. Inside was a letter, not from Dad, but from Catherine, written the day before her death, her handwriting steady despite the weight of her words. "Sarah," it read, "if you're reading this, you've found the truth. Eleanor is your mother, but I am your home. I chose you, loved you, from the moment I held you. There's one more secret, one I couldn't tell Tom. You have a sister, not James, but someone else, out there, waiting to be found. Her name is Leela Ellis, and she's in Astoria, Oregon. Find her, Sarah, for me. Tell her I loved her too." My heart stopped. A sister? The letter included an address and a faded photograph of a girl, maybe 5. Her pigtails framing a face so like mine, it stole my breath. Her eyes held Catherine's quiet strength, a spark of resilience. I clutched the photo, tears falling onto the attic floor. Catherine had carried this alone, protecting me, protecting Lila. I wondered where Lila was now, what life she'd lived, whether she knew about me. The thought was thrilling, terrifying, a new thread in our family's tapestry. I showed the letter to Becca, who stood in the attic doorway, her eyes bright with determination. "We'll find her," she said, squeezing my hand. "Together." Her voice was a vow, her touch a promise, and I felt the weight of our future, tentative but real. We'd survived Eleanor's betrayal, Dad's death, the unraveling of everything I'd known. Lila was a new beginning, a chance to rebuild what we'd lost. That night, we stood on the cliffs, the mansion's lights glowing behind us, a beacon in the dark. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of roses and salt, the ocean stretching endless before us. Becca's arm was around my waist, her warmth grounding me. I leaned into her, our hands intertwined, and felt hope bloom, fragile but fierce. We'd find Lila, rebuild our family, write a new chapter. The stars above were bright, like the ones we'd watched as teenagers, dreaming of lives we were only now beginning to live. But as we turned to head back, I saw a figure in the distance, standing where the path met the sea. A woman, her face obscured by shadow, her silhouette sharp against the moonlight. She held something that glinted like a key, its shape familiar, like the one to Dad's safe. She didn't move, didn't speak, but her presence sent a chill through me, colder than the Maine wind. The Mitchell estate had given up its secrets, or so I thought. The waves crashed below, relentless and unyielding, and I knew this wasn't the end. Another truth was waiting, pulling me into the unknown.